Manual retopology in ZBrush has always been possible, but it just became a lot more accessible. The new Retopo brush keeps everything simple, visual, and easy to adjust. And honestly, it just makes the whole process of retopology a lot of fun. Hey, what's up guys, Paulo Munoz here. I got lots of questions about this new Retopo brush in ZBrush, so I just had to move this tutorial in the queue of requests really. So just in case you haven't heard about it or the new updates of ZBrush 2026.1, the kind of like big thing is the new Retopology brush. And personally, I think it's just a game changer because you can quickly retopologize a mesh in ZBrush in a much more streamlined way. And yes, we already had other methods like the C-sphere method. There's also the brush called Topology brush to make new geometry, although it's not necessarily the same. And of course, we had this C-modeler. So this new brush is a big deal because it kind of combines the best of all these tools into a more intuitive and kind of like a streamlined way of doing things. But like anything in ZBrush, it takes a little bit of time to get used to. So I'm going to jump right in and show you the basics of this brush, plus a couple of really nice tricks that I discovered while I was beta testing this tool. Let's just go ahead and do it. All right, so here we are in ZBrush. This is 2026.1. And of course, I have my own custom UI, but don't worry, I'm not even gonna show you anything in particular of the UI. The Retopology brush is literally just a brush. So all we need to do is click on the thumbnail. And if you don't see it where I see it, because that's my UI, you can just go to the brush palette, click on the thumbnail here, and let's go ahead and filter, or you can just click on this one. This is the Retopology brush. It has a number next to it, 228. That is just because it comes with really nice presets or patches that you can attach or add into your model. We'll talk about that in just a second. But if you want just the shortcut, you can press the letter B, then R for Retopology, and then E. That's it. You see, it just adds this on the side. By the way, you might not see it on the side. Again, this is just a custom UI. So I'm going to show you that straight away. And I promise that's the last thing I'm going to cover in terms of the UI that is different for you. So if you go to the preference palette here and you go to the interface, let's go to open up the IMM viewer. And you have this placement that allows you to change where that thing is. So just an extra little trick for you. I like to have it on the right-hand side, but you might have more real estate vertically, so you can just put it here at the top. For me, it just makes sense to have it there. Or if you don't want to see it at all, you can just click on this show hide. That shows or hides this side of things. That's it. That's the Retopology brush. We're going to cover what this is in just a second, but these are the basics. That's how you select the Retopology brush. You don't have to do anything. Now, this is a character that I worked for a previous series that I have on YouTube. I'll leave a link as well in the description in case you want to see how I build this from scratch using CC5, ZBrush, Substance Painter, and Marmoset, which is pretty cool. But anyway, this is a Dynamesh object. So let's go ahead and actually, let me just show you something else. I have in the subtools the head and some spheres for the eyes. So those are the two subtools, but this is a Dynamesh object. So if I bring in my polyframe, you see this is just, very, very unusable geometry, right? But it has all the details that I need. So that's when you potentially want to use the Retopology brush. You want to create a clean quad-based mesh, something that works to reproject these, have subdivision levels, and maybe you're not happy with what the series mesher can give you. So the manual retopology with the Retopo brush, it's kind of like for that specific purpose, or at least that's kind of like what most people will use it. All right, so I just wanted to show you that this is a Dynamesh object. I have only two subtools. We're going to concentrate on the head, and we have selected the Retopology brush. All right, so now I'm going to go into full screen here so you can see the full thing, and I'm going to collapse this, and I'm also going to press the tab on my keyboard. So you'll see I have a pretty clean UI. Right? So you should be able to do the same thing. Just collapse all your trays and also press the tab on your keyboard. And that allows you to see this in full screen. All right. So the Topology brush is, or the Retopo brush, rather, that's the actual name. It's actually pretty simple once you learn some of the basics, but it is, like I said, it takes a while to get used to. So let's click on this all, and that shows you all the patches that you're going to find. Now, you don't have to use this at all. It's just that it gives you a good starting point, especially if you're doing something like a humanoid character. You can just go ahead and click on human, and then you see you have the left eye, you have a nice topology for the right ear, you have the nose, you have some kind of like presets, loops, if you will, that are pretty handy. So I'm going to show you the basics. I actually don't use this as much because my creatures and my stuff tend to be less realistic, and I tend to go for stylized. But we might find some areas that we can make use of these, presets. Now, the cool thing about the Retopology brush, I'm going to give you the basics. If you press this spacebar, you see I'm pressing right now And I'm actually going to bring in this tool that actually is going to show you what brushes, or sorry, what keys I'm pressing. So if I press the spacebar, you'll see right here at the bottom left of the screen. So if I press the spacebar, you see how my cursor changes in size. This only happens in the Retopo brush, and for a good reason. The brush that you see here, or the size of the brush that you see here, is essentially the reach of that brush, of like how many points I can grab. But if I hold spacebar, you see I have a different diameter of brush. That is to connect dots. Don't worry, this is going to make more sense. I just want to show you that it is important. The spacebar is an important tool, or an important feature of this tool. You also have the shift, and you also have the alt key, right? So I'm going to show you how all that works. Now, this also works with symmetry. So I can press the letter X on my keyboard and I can enable that symmetry. Actually, let me just bring this in. So I have it here in my UI. So right now I'm going to activate symmetry so you can see it works. All right. But so far I haven't touched the mesh. Now, this is kind of like the next step. Once you select the brush, before we get into how it works, if you click anywhere on the mesh, you're going to get this pop-up. Now, this message is telling you, what do you want to do? So you want to create a new retopology or a new mesh for this retopology, or you want to continue editing this. I wouldn't advise to retopology the current mesh because it has a lot of points and it's going to be pretty heavy and it's going to potentially crash. So in this particular case that we already have a pretty dense mesh, the idea would be to create a new topology brush, right? So I'm going to click on yes. However, there are other options, or there are other situations where you might want to have, you want to click on no. Now, those situations are more like specific. So if you already have, let's say a series measure, right? You go through the series measure and it gives you something that is 99% ready, but there's some things that you want to do manually. That's a good case scenario because you have the retopology brush for that manual purpose, basically. So you have the remeasure or the series measure, then you click on it with the topology brush, and then you select no in this pop-up, and that allows you to edit that series mesh with this tool. So that's kind of like in, one case scenario. So in our case, let's go ahead and click on yes. That's it. And let's wait until ZBrush does this autosave. All right. And we are ready to get started. Now, you might notice that the eyes, I don't know if you can see it here, but the eyes are now in X-ray mode. So I want to show you what happens once you click on that pop-up and you click on yes, once you have the topology brush or Retopo brush. So let's press tab here to go back in, and let's open up the tray where I can see my subtools. And you see I have the head and I have a Retopo. Now, by default, it should already select this. It's just that automatically autosave. So there's that. But anyway, you have this Retopo 1. And it automatically set this transparency, and you can just start like clicking anywhere. So if I just click here, you'll see I now have a orange point. Brilliant. That's it. And I can just click and do a bunch of these dots anywhere that I want. I'm not doing this in any particular order. This is not going to be a great topology, just showing you how the tool works. All right, so I just want to show you this because this is happening on this new subtool that has the little square lines. And it is actually projecting, or the points are being projected into whatever volume you have visible. So in this case, the head and potentially the eyes, right? So if I click in here, it's also taking into account anything that is visible. Now, on a side note, that's actually a good thing. If you want to combine multiple subtools into one retopologized version, you can have them all visible. And this tool allows you to create a topology based on the volume of multiple subtools. So really, really cool stuff. All right, so now let's go ahead and collapse this and press tab. And we have a bunch of points. Great. So what do we do with this? Right now, they're just virtual points. They're nothing really. And the way that we create the topology is by pressing the spacebar. So if I press the spacebar, you'll see that my cursor changes again. And we have this tiny little white icon, inside my brush cursor that indicates that I'm going to be creating quads. So I'm going to hover over, and you'll see it sort of highlights this with blue, but nothing really is happening, right? I'm just pressing spacebar and just hovering over. So I can actually create these polygons right now because of the size of my brush and because I put them, rather far apart. So if I just go ahead and create a couple more points here that are closer together, like this, right? And I press the spacebar, you'll see that now it's starting to connect these dots, right? So that is because of the size of this cursor. That's why I mentioned that at the beginning, that the spacebar becomes crucial. So I can just go ahead and press the spacebar around here and click with my left mouse. That's it. So that creates a point in here. Let's do the same thing here. And there we go. I'm going to actually turn on the polyframe so you can see this better. By the way, the polyframe should also be enabled by default. Again, just ZBrush saved on me. That's pretty much it. So now I have quads. Great. If I go into solo mode, you see this is actual geometry, which is great. And obviously we have the virtual points. Now, what happens if I want to actually have a larger point here in this area? Well, if I press a spacebar, I won't be able to fill this and these 4 points. So there are 2 options. The option that I've been using, like I said, it's for me is just figure out what works for me first. And then I optimize the workflow. But what I found it works really well is I can just step back a little bit and my cursor or the size of my brush won't change, and I can just go ahead and do this. So that's it. The alternative is if you don't want to get, out or zoom out and zoom in, and you want to maybe connect, let's actually connect, let's put one more here, connect these 4 points, and your brush is not big enough, you can right click, right? That brings in your draw size. And if you press the space bar, you see that access the draw size for the topology brush. So I can just push this up. And then when I press the space bar here, now I'll be able to see it. Now I'm going to press just to show you. And that's really all there is to it. That's the basics of this brush. And I know that this might look like a convoluted process to just create polygons, but trust me, this brush is fantastic. And the workflow is actually really simple once you get the hang of it. So just to make sure that you believe me, I'm going to show you how it would work in a real scenario. So let's actually start again. There's ways of like removing this, but I don't want to confuse you with more tools right now. So I'm just going to delete that. Right? I'm going to select the head again, and I'm going to click once again, and I'm going to click yes. So that creates that whole thing, and we are kind of like in a fresh start. So let's say that I want to do this this muscle here for the nasolabial muscle here. I'm going to go ahead and click once and twice, and then I'm going to create the points for a quad that I think we need, right? So if I press the spacebar now, I'm actually going to reduce the brush size of the spacebar. There we go. And I'm going to press the spacebar now, and I just created that point. Great. But this will be pretty tedious to just make points every time that you want to do a quad, and then just press spacebar and so on and so forth. So what I'll do is I'm going to kind of like set the points for the quads that I want following a specific flow like this, right? So let's say that I want this to connect here in the chin somehow, like that, maybe even here in the middle. And let's say these ones are too far or too close by, right? So I can actually move them. So this is like the next thing that you can do. Once you set up the initial set of points, you can actually click on them and you can move them around. Now, in this case, I'm going to remove them because I don't need them. And to remove a point, a virtual point, you can press the Alt key. So I'm going to press the Alt key now and click on the points. You see how they disappear. There we go. And instead, I'm just going to click on a single point here and another one. So this is going to be a larger polygon. All right. So that's how you move points. You just hover over, left click, and move it around. And you see how I'm pulling a bunch more of these points. That is because of the radius of my brush. Like I said, it takes a while to get used to, but I promise it's a super streamlined workflow once you get the hang of it. So I'm going to repeat this because the only thing that you really need to remember when working with this brush is the spacebar. It just changes things quite a bit. So the normal brush size is to move things around and add points. The spacebar is the one that creates the polygons and so on. So now that I have this line, what I'll do is I'm just going to press the spacebar here, and I'm going to click once, and without letting go of the click, I'm just going to drag. So you see how this could become quite a nice workflow, right? All I've done is just I set set up my layout of points, and then I just follow this line. That's it. Now at this point, I might go, right, this is a little bit weird. I'm going to push this down, but I don't want to move this one. This was fine. And I start kind of fighting with topology, which is usually what I find really triggering in terms of dealing with topology, because you kind of expect something to behave in a certain way and it just doesn't do it. So there is a nice little trick. This is kind of like the first trick I'm going to give you or tip when using this topology brush. So let's go ahead and take the brush palette, and I'm going to drop that here on the right-hand side. And I'm going to scroll down to where it says Retopology. So these settings right here are specifically for this Retopo brush. So the one that I want to draw your attention to, which I found it invaluable. And in fact, when I was doing the beta testing for this brush, I had this in my UI. So the move by draw size. So that's exactly what is happening. So if I click on this point, because of the brush size of my brush, it's going to grab a few more points. So what I like doing is having this in my UI, but I'm just showing you where you can find it. You can click on it, and that disables that function. So you can now click a point with the size of your brush, and it's only going to move one point. So I find this to be quite useful in some situations. But like I said, it is important to have it in your UI so that you can turn it on and off. Because in other situations, you might want to push things quite a bit. So if I turn this on and I click in the edge, for example, the edge also allows you to move that. And now that we're on the topic, you can actually, not just move one point. You can take the entire polygon like this and you can move it. And again, it's going to be projected to the volume. So you can take polygons and move them. You can take edges, you can move them, and you can take points as well and move them. All right, so what else we can do with this Retopology brush? Let's say that I want to connect now the masseter or this area here of the jaw. If I want to create new points, again, all I need to do is click once, twice, 3 times, and basically build my points, and then press the spacebar. If I cannot feel it, but I see the blue things or the blue points coming through, I just step back a little bit, press the spacebar, and I connect those points, right? If it makes this mess, again, with like triangles and all of that, you can totally do that, or you can totally fix it. But the real solution is to just undo and go back with a larger brush or further apart and do it. However, if you get this and you don't want to have it, you can press the Alt key and just click on the polygons, and you'll see it just the virtual points that you set, they're still there. So it's just a very quick way to go back and forward to the topology that you want. So now from this angle, I'm going to press and build it. There we go. So now we have that line. And by the way, in terms of the workflow, that's what I would recommend. You create your loops first, and then you start filling in the areas. All right, so let's say that I want to continue this looping here. I could do the same thing that I just showed you, but I'm going to show you another really cool thing that you can do with this brush. Now, if you press the Alt key, remember I mentioned Alt key would be another great modifier for this. So if I press the Alt key, I can click on or hover over the edge, and you see the little white icon changes from the move option to this kind of like a square with a little bracket rotating 45 degrees in a way. So that means extruding the edge. So if I press the Alt key again, click or left click, I can do this. And I'm going to extrude this like so, maybe move this like so. And if I accidentally make points and I go like, oh, that's not what I wanted, because it will become an issue when I try to extrude it. Like if I press this and I connect this, it's going to try to snap to those points. So if you don't want to have these points, or you accidentally click and make a point, the way that you remove those is by holding the Control key, click and drag. Almost like if you were Dynameshing, just removing that, or removing a mask really. So I'm going to move this. I'm also going to turn this off so that I can move individual points a little bit easier. I'm going to press the Alt key and then Alt key again. And let's do one more time. And this is another really cool thing about the brush. Pay attention to what happens when I get closer. It's going to automatically snap into the middle line. So that is fantastic. All right, so I'll just do this to have that there. And by the way, my goal here with this video is just to show you how this works and the brush. So I'm probably not going to do the entire character, but yeah, I just want to show you how easy this is. Now, there's something else that this brush is really good at, which is optimizing certain boring processes. So imagine like this area right here. I will have to create a bunch of points and then, use the spacebar. Let's actually make more so that I don't have to go further. Like so, press the spacebar and go like, all right, let's connect this and then all this, and I create a patch. Great. Now, these become a little bit boring, so there's automated or semi-automated ways of dealing with this that are really clever with this brush. But now that I have this weird patch here, I'm going to show you a couple of things. You also have the Shift brush to smooth things out. So let me bring in my UI again. So if I press the Shift key, you'll see that automatically when I select the Retopo brush, ZBrush also selects the Smooth Retopology brush, which is to smooth this out. So I'm going to go ahead and press the Shift key now, and I can just go ahead and smooth this out. So you see it was like a bit wonky, but it would respect the edges of the patch that you create. So again, Shift key and press, and you see it just kind of like averages everything. I wouldn't advise to constantly do the smoothing brush when you're retopologizing. It's something that I, generally speaking, I do after, kind of like make sure that I have my loops and I have the patches and everything else connected, and then I will smooth things out. But it is there and it's automatic. It's part of this brush when you select it. So it is great. Now, in the intro of this video, I mentioned that we had the Z-Modeler brush, and this brush takes advantage of some of the cool things that you can do with that Z-Modeler brush. So for instance, if I hold the Alt key, I can, drag to extrude this edge. But if I press, I haven't let go of the click, by the way, but if I press the Alt key once, you'll see that I can do an extrusion of the entire patch, right? So this is an extra little trick that, it works with this brush. It's something that you can already do with the C modeler, but it's inbuilt into this brush. Now, if you press Alt again, you go back to this single one. Great. Now I can do this, and then I can also hold the Alt key and drag this out and then connect this. The other thing you can do is extrude a point. So if you hover over the point, press the Alt key, click and drag, you're actually extruding from this point and creating a quad. So this specific point or this specific area is actually really helpful when you're doing retopology. So you can maybe hold the Control key here and drag this out, and I'll do the same thing here and the same thing here. And then just to show you exactly what this does, I'm going to press the Shift key to smooth that out. So basically, this area right here becomes its own loop, and I can close that loop in there. All right. So that's really, really handy. So that's it in terms of the Alt modifier for this brush. You can, like I said before, delete different polygroups. You can also, again, hold the Alt key from an edge and extrude it, or you can extrude a point and create this type of edges. Now, remember when I said that the spacebar is really important? Well, in this case, is crucial if you want to add a loop in here. So if I press the spacebar and I click here, you'll see my icon, the little white icon on my brush cursor changes to be an insert edge loop. So I'm just pressing the spacebar and dragging along, and I can just maybe create one in there. Then I'm going to go press the spacebar and maybe create one around there. And this is how you can create this type of loops. Very, very handy stuff. Now, let me just create another patch here just to show you another really cool thing you can do with the topology brush. So I'm going to click a few points here. There might be a little bit too large, but it should be enough. Then let's move back a bit, press the spacebar, and connect them. That's it. So this is probably the best and easiest workflow that you can find just to create those things in there. All right, so that is great, and that's one way of doing it. But if you want to create multiple edge loops, if you press a spacebar, it will be quite tedious to have to do this multiple times. And sometimes you want this to be consistent, and manually, sometimes it's not going to be that consistent. So I'm going to undo that. By the way, that's another great thing, that you can actually undo this within the topology that you're creating. So the way that you can create multiple edge loops is by pressing the spacebar and clicking to add one, but then you let go of the spacebar, and that basically creates that edge loop right in the middle of these polygons. And then you can just go ahead and go left and right with your mouse to create, add, or remove some of these lines. So let's say that I want to have 3 lines. So this is a great thing to speed up the workflow, because if you want, you can just create another one there, let go of the spacebar, and then you can add a few more in here. Maybe something like this, just so that these ones are more quads. All right. Now that we are here, let's say that in terms of, if we were to retopology this entire character, these loops in here, they don't really make any sense. And this one obviously is way too dense at the moment for a retopology, especially in this area, right? So how do you remove these loops? The easiest method, again, is not as obvious, but is really, really handy once you get the hang of it, is using the Alt key and clicking and dragging. So instead of just holding the Alt key, which deletes an edge, basically. So in my case, I just removed 2 polygons. Let's undo that. What I want to do is remove this edge loop right here, okay? So all I need to do is hold the Alt key, click and drag across that polygon. You see it gets this red line. So as long as I cross that, I'm going to delete it. Perfect. So I'll do the same thing here, Alt, and maybe I'm going to do the same thing here, like so. Let's go ahead and do that one and that one. So you see, once you get the hang of it, like I've been saying throughout this video, it might sound like, or it might look like a very convoluted way of doing retopology. But believe me, if you spend the time, you follow along with this video, and you get the basics right, this is a really fast and effective way of creating a controlled manual retopology. So there you have it. That's how you can, delete some loops. So I can just go ahead and get closer here, delete this one and this one. And now we have a simpler, cleaner mesh. Now, the other thing that is not necessarily part of the Retopology brush, but is built in within the ZBrush ecosystem, and that's why it's good to know these basics and know a little bit about the software, is that you can use the rest of the tools that come with the software. So for instance, I can go to the polygroups palette, and I can click on auto groups, and because all of these pieces are separate, it's going to create a separate polygroup. Also, if I don't like this, right, and I want to remove it, I can go one by one and delete it, right? Or the alternative is that I can go into solo mode. Remember, this is its own tool. And I'm going to go ahead and hold the Control and the Shift key to access my selection brushes. I'm going to drag, press the Alt key to hide it. And then I'm going to go to geometry. I know this is a bit extra. You don't have to do it. It's probably easier to do it with the Retopology brush. but it's important to mention it because if I go to modify topology, I can delete hidden, right? And that doesn't affect anything of what I'm doing. It's just topology, or it's just mesh that I'm just deleting. And I can just go ahead and go back by pressing the solo mode. So I go back to this one. And because I have the Retopo brush, I can continue. Now, another cool thing is to create patches, or what I was showing you before, is that kind of like semi-automated or optimized way that I mentioned. So I'm going to collapse this to go back to like full real estate here. Actually, let me turn off transparency. Let's leave transparency. I'm going to turn off symmetry off. I just don't want to confuse you with what is in here. So I'm going to actually remove that, delete that. Okay. So let's say that we're here and we want to create a similar patch to, or a similar area to what we did before. Now, if you hold the Alt key, I'm holding it right now, you can click and drag a point like so. So this creates a single line. Now, from this line, you can go ahead and press the Alt key and extrude it. So this is like a big edge, right? And you can do that. Or without pressing any modifier, any spacebar or anything, you can just press or click on the left click and drag, and that allows you to create points along that line. And you see how it just kind of like wobbly? That is because it's trying to conform or follow the current volume. So this is fantastic because I can just go ahead and do something like this. And this is something that it borrows from the SimModeler, that it will remember the current settings. So I can just press the spacebar again, the Alt key again, and do this. And you see it automatically creates these patches. So this is what I was saying about creating a more automated or simpler way to create these larger patches in here, because it remembers that sort of amount of points that you add. But this is still a virtual topology. So I haven't actually created the topology. So at this point, if you like what you have, you can just click outside and it will create that topology or create that patch. So that's what I'm saying. It's a really handy tool to speed up the workflow. It's just about understanding the basics and make sure that you get comfortable with this brush and with this workflow, because it might not be the most intuitive one. But I believe me, once you do it a few times, it's going to be really easy. So for instance, in this case, I can just connect this and I'm going to do the same thing here. Snaps nicely. And if you have issues with snapping things and making sure that, things connect properly, let's say I'm going to try this. So I already snapped this point, then it's actually pretty good. But let's say that I cannot do it. I can just get it to this point where I can only snap one point, and this one right here, I can. The cool thing is that you can also grab a point like this, you can move it and it will snap. So you can just adjust it afterwards. But as just like before, if we go back to the brush settings, to the Retopology, you also have this snap threshold. So you can play around with this slider, and that's basically telling ZBrush how close you should be to a point to be able to snap it. So play around with that, but this is just a very simple way of doing things. So let's just go ahead and adjust this, even though, I'm not necessarily doing any nice topology at the moment. If I were to just connect this dark purple with this lighter purple color here, or polygroup, I can just go ahead and press the Alt key, do this type of stuff. Maybe we need less, so I'm gonna click again and reduce the amount, maybe 4. And I'll do the same thing from this angle. So Alt, drag, like so. It creates that patch. I'm gonna click outside to accept, and then hold the Alt key just to connect this. There we go. And there you go. That's pretty much it. So the game really begins when you try to fill in those loops. Let's assume that this is a correct loop. I'm not saying it is, but let's say that this is. I just need to make sure that when I start creating these things, I have enough geometry. So in order to connect these ones with these ones at the bottom, I'm going to probably have to press the spacebar, create a loop there. So you see, once you get the hang of it, like I've been saying throughout the video, it becomes really, really, really easy thing to do. I'm going to connect this one randomly here. Or not randomly, but that one goes there. And this one goes here. And then I'm going to press the spacebar, the shift key to smooth this out. Like I said, it's not an ideal topology, so don't follow this tutorial to create good topology. I'm just showing you the basics of this brush. So finally, what I do want to show you are these patches, because they're pretty prominent and a lot of people probably want to use them. Like I said, I prefer to do things completely manual, and especially because of the type of work that I do and the stylized characters and sometimes exaggerated proportions, but it is very, very handy. So for instance, if I just isolate these bits, let's actually remove that and this one. I'm going to delete all of that. I have a custom shortcut for delete hidden. That's it. So let's say that we are happy with this, but we want to use some of these patches. So let's say the eyebrow, right? So I'm going to go to human. So in this human category here, I'm going to click on this eyebrow or the brow left, and I'm going to add it. Now, the way that you add this again, it also has its trick, but again, it's very simple once you know how it's done. So the first thing you need to do is click once to drop a point. So now that I have that virtual point, if I hold the Alt key and hover over, you see that my cursor also changes to that sort of square with a point in the middle. That is because it's telling me that's going to be the pivot or the center point of whatever patch I click. So Alt, click and drag, and there we go. So I'm just going to do something like this. And you see it also works with symmetry. But again, I'm not going to confuse you. So let's go back. I'm going to hold Control, click and drag to remove that. Get rid of the topology, of the symmetry. Do it again. So dropping 1 point, then pressing the Alt key, click and drag. And that is roughly my eyebrow. Now, you can just go ahead and click outside, and that also saves that patch, and you see how it projects nicely into the eyebrow. So that's great. Let's undo that. I'm going to do it again just to show you something else. All right, so let's say that you have this and you go, okay, that's great, but I might not add it in the right place. So you can just click the whole thing and you can move it around. So this is a virtual thing, and you can also move the character around. You see it's kind of like projecting from a single plane, from the normal that you clicked on. So I'm just going to click around to move it there. But obviously, you might have a character that doesn't look like this, or is not as humanoid, or it doesn't fit exactly in the right place. So one thing that you can do is click on these points or any corner, you press the Alt key, and you can actually skew that. So you can maybe manipulate that to create something slightly more suitable to your character. All right, so let's say I'm happy with this. I'm going to click just to project that, and I'm going to press the spacebar quickly just to adjust it. And this is too narrow, so I'm going to move these points like so. And honestly, this is how I've been using it. Like, you can use these patches. I like to use the manual method, but these are extremely handy when you want to speed up process. So what I like to do is use the patches, then I use the edges of that patch to adjust them better to my topology. So in this case, that's all I'm doing. And that's why I found that this specific setting of move by draw size is really good to have it in your custom UI, because you can switch between moving 1 point or adjusting multiple ones. All right, so once I'm happy with, let's say, the distribution of this, I can press the spacebar and then just move that out so that it averages the placement of these points, which is great. Cool. Now, one thing that is very important, and I'm going to cover this just to wrap it up, which is something that one of my students actually asked me, is the fact that you have a bunch of these patches, but it seemed like a little bit isolated. It seemed like you just need to add patches, but how do you connect them? How do they work together? And that could be like a whole course in itself, which has to do with topology and what constitutes a good topology. And I'm just gonna say this straight up. A good topology is just whatever works for whatever you're doing. So having triangles works, having a decimated mesh works, having quads and a combination of quads and triangles works. Have a very low res mesh or a very low poly mesh or a very high poly mesh works. Everything is a good topology as long as it works for the outcome or for the function of what you wanted. So something with triangles, with heaps of triangles, like a decimated character, might not be ideal for animation because it's harder to deform. If you have something like a decimated character, it's harder to deform naturally and nicely. But a good topology is whatever works. So that's very important. But the second thing, or the original thing that I wanted to mention, is how to judge what patches to use and how to use them together. And that is just more of a trial and error. So like I said, depending on the character that you're working on, or depending on the type of topology you want to create. In my case, this works fine, but it's still a patch that is isolated. So here's what I can do. I can just go ahead and connect it, or figure out a way to connect this with what I already done manually. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to press the Alt key, drag this out, and then do the same thing here. Done. That's already connected somehow. I'm going to drag this like so. Here's another really neat trick. You don't have to always work with symmetry. You can just go beyond that middle line, which is roughly here. I'll do the same thing with this one and with this one. And I'm actually going to remove this like so. All right. And then I'm going to actually add another point or another edge loop there. And I'm going to go up here. All right. So just bear with me. I want to be able to show you something else. All right, cool. So this is kind of like a way of connecting that edge loop. And of course, you can continue from here. You can just go like this. All right, not the greatest thing, but it definitely shows you that you can utilize those patches and just connect them. Now, the extra little trick that I want to show you is that you don't have to work with symmetry all the time. This is not symmetrical anymore. But I can take these points and I can just move them beyond that center line. And then I can just go ahead and mirror and weld, because again, it works with other tools in ZBrush. So if I just mirror this to the other side and then mirror and weld, I'm going to create that center line again, and I'm going to have the topology working. And this is obviously because my underlying mesh, the volumes that I have, already has symmetry. So that works really well. And then I can just press the spacebar to clean this up. And there you go. Those are the basics of the Retopo brush. All right, hopefully this has been of help. As always, if you have any questions about this, drop them in the comments of this video. And remember, you can also join our art community in Discord, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.